Hello and welcome to eChinese Learning Pod, your go-to podcast for learning Chinese and exploring Chinese culture. To protect speakers' privacy and enhance audio quality, some or all voices in this episode are created with AI assistance.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a mission that I think many of you have probably considered pretty daunting: learning Chinese characters.
It is, it's arguably one of the biggest hurdles for anyone starting to learn Mandarin. I mean, you just look at the sheer volume of them.
Yeah.
Thousands of distinct, complex symbols that you need just for basic literacy. It can feel less like you're learning a language and more like you're trying to memorize a vast abstract code.
Absolutely. And the traditional approach, the one I think most people kind of default to, is often just brute force repetition. You sit down, you draw the character 50 times, and you just hope it sticks.
Right. The drill and kill method.
Exactly. Today, they offer a radically different and frankly far more efficient perspective.
That's right. The mission for this specific deep dive is really to give you, the non-Chinese speaker, a structured guide on how to approach character acquisition intelligently. We're moving beyond that arbitrary drawing practice, and we're looking at 4 complementary sort of cognitive shortcuts that can transform the task from what feels like impossible memorization into something that's logical and structured.
So this isn't just about learning the characters themselves, it's about learning how the entire system works.
Yes.
Which makes the process faster and, I'd imagine, infinitely more sustainable.
That's the key word, sustainable.
We've distilled the key insight into 4 core pillars. First, breaking characters down into their components, or radicals. Second, recognizing the vital necessity of context, learning them in sentences. Third, unlocking the mnemonic power of their historical evolution, which is fascinating. And finally, setting yourself up for success by using graded reading materials.
And if you can integrate these 4 strategies, you really do stop seeing this overwhelming wall of complexity. You'd start to see a beautifully designed, interconnected, and logical system. It just changes the entire learning experience.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with that foundational problem. Why does rote repetition fail so badly? And how do we use structure the radicals to fix it?
Well, the foundational error in character learning, as you just mentioned, is isolation. It's learning them in a vacuum.
Right.
When a character like, say,
乌龟
which means turtle, and it's a famously complex one, is just drawn stroke by stroke without any context, your brain perceives it as a single, massive, arbitrary piece of visual data.
It's just a scribble.
It's a very complex scribble, and our short-term memory, it just can't handle thousands of such massive, complex, isolated data points for the long run. It's not built for that.
It's like the difference between trying to memorize the specific arrangement of pebbles on a beach versus trying to memorize the layout of your kitchen.
That's a perfect analogy.
The kitchen is structured, right? It's categorized. The beach is just random chaos. Isolation leads to rapid memory decay because there's nothing for the information to anchor to.
And cognitive science backs this up completely. I mean, memory retention thrives on connection, categorization, and meaning. So if we can break down that complex turtle character into smaller, meaningful, reusable parts, we reduce the cognitive load dramatically.
And those parts are what the sources call radicals, or components.
Exactly.
So define that relationship for us. How does learning, say, 200 components help me with 3,000 characters? That still sounds like a lot.
It does, but it changes the math completely. A radical is a fundamental building block. It's a reusable, standardized part of a character. So while there are a few hundred radicals, mastering them, well, it fundamentally changes the arithmetic of learning.
No, so.
Instead of memorizing 3,000 unique individual shapes, you are essentially learning an alphabet of 200 to 300 meaningful components.
Okay, I see.
And these can then be combined and recombined almost infinitely. This is the very definition of an efficiency gain.
And the most important function of these components is that they provide clues, right? And I think there are 2 types, which is where the real depth of this system starts to emerge. It's not just about what they mean.
Precisely. Let's start with the one that most learners focus on first, which is the semantic component. The radical frequently acts as a meaning indicator. It tells you the general category that the character belongs to.
Like a tag.
Exactly like a tag. Excellent example of the water radical.
Right, that's the 3-dot radical.
Well,
you usually find it on the left side of a character.
That's the one. When you see green, it's an immediate signal. Your brain should think, this character deals with liquid, water, or hydration in some way.
Okay.
Think of the example,
河
which means river, And
海
which means sea, the semantic component, that little radical, instantly classifies these characters as relating to vast bodies of water.
And crucially, this applies to actions as well, not just nouns. The verb 洗, meaning to wash, also carries that three-dot radical. The action requires water.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
that's a powerful mnemonic, isn't it? Because your brain isn't treating river and wash as two entirely separate random ideas. It's categorizing them under the header of a water-related concept.
That's the first crucial step, recognizing that semantic clue. But to really deep dive into the character structure, we have to address the second and equally vital function of these components. This is the one that dramatically accelerates learning.
The phonetic clue.
The phonetic clue.
This is where it gets really interesting, when you realize that the structure provides not just a hint about the meaning, but also a strong hint about the sound.
Yes. Many Chinese characters are what we call phonosemantic compounds. It sounds complicated, but it's not.
Break it down.
It just means they are built from two parts. One component that suggests the meaning, that's the semantic radical we just talked about, and another component that suggests the pronunciation, that's the phonetic component.
Give us an example of how this internal pronunciation clue works, because that sounds like a massive shortcut for reading.
It is a massive shortcut. Okay, let's take the component.
马
Right.
On its own, it means horse, and it's pronounced.
马
Right.
Now, consider the character,
娘
which means mother.
Okay.
It uses that phonetic component, but it combines it with the radical,
女
which means woman or female.
I see. So the female radical tells you the meaning category, a person, specifically a woman, and the key component, the horse part, gives you the approximate sound.
马
Exactly. The meaning is anchored by the radical, the woman part, but the sound is derived from the horse component. And that's why
娘
and ma sound similar, but they aren't identical.
So it's a guide, not a perfect match.
It's a rough guide, but it's reliable enough to narrow down the pronunciation possibilities significantly. Let's look at a whole family of characters derived from the component,
青
which means blue-green or lush. If you combine with the water radical we talked about, the three dots,
Wow.
you get
青
which means clear, like clear water.
Makes sense.
If you combine with the mouth radical, you get
请
which means to invite or request, something you do with your mouth.
Right. That is fascinating. So you can see how different the meanings are, clear, invite, but they all share a similar root sound that's provided by that component.
And what's so powerful here is that you, the learner, you're not relying solely on arbitrary visual memory anymore.
Yeah.
You're using an interlocking logical system. The radical helps you guess the category, and the phonetic component helps you guess the sound. It's a dual memory anchor, and it helps both with recognition and with that critical skill of active recall.
I have to ask the skeptical question, though, the one that any learner would have. If you commit to learning hundreds of radicals, aren't you going to get them confused? I mean, a lot of them look really similar. They only have a few strokes, like the mouth radical and the enclosure radical, which look almost identical.
That's a great question, and it's a totally valid concern. The key to managing similarity is really twofold. It's consistency and context.
Okay.
First, you have to learn the component's consistent position and function. The position often dictates its identity. So while the mouth radical usually appears as a standalone character or as a component within another, the enclosure radical acts like a box. It encompasses the rest of the character.
I see. So where it is tells you what it is.
A lot of the time, yes. And second, the stroke count matters. You need to be precise about the number of strokes because these small details are what differentiate similar-looking components.
So the synthesis here is really clear. Stop treating a character as one big, complex picture. Start seeing it as a logical two-part system, a meaning hint and a sound hint, which just dramatically reduces the volume of new information you have to memorize.
It's truly structure over brute force repetition. And once we understand the internal structure of the character, well, the next crucial step is understanding the external structure, how those characters actually operate in the wild.
Right. So if Section 1 gave us the atomic component, Section 2 is about providing the molecular structure, putting those components into usable language units. And your sources make a really powerful declaration here. A word should never be learned by itself.
This point is it's so critical for moving beyond academic knowledge and into actual fluency. The limitation of rote vocabulary lists is profound. We confuse passive knowledge, just being able to recognize something, with active knowledge, which is being able to produce it.
So you can pass a vocabulary quiz?
You can ace the quiz, but then you try to construct a thought in a real conversation, and the words are stiff, the grammar feels unnatural, or worse, they fail to materialize at all.
It's a massive cognitive bottleneck, isn't it? When you learn a word in isolation, your brain just stores it in this sterile lexicon.
Yeah.
And the moment you need to use it, your brain has to perform three separate functions.
Mm-hmm.
It has to retrieve the word, find its grammatical function, is a noun, a verb, an adverb, and then integrate it correctly into a sentence structure. That three-step process is just too slow for real-time conversation.
The contextual approach, on the other hand, streamlines this into a single step. By learning a word within a full, meaningful, usable sentence, you are automatically embedding all the essential scaffolding.
The syntax, the common collocation.
The situational relevance. We're learning language that is, from the very beginning, ready to use.
Let's use the specific, and I think it's an excellent example provided in the source material. The word
医生
which means doctor. If I just memorize it from a flashcard, toe doctor, that's my entire toolkit. That's all I've got.
But the source directs us to learn it within a phrase like,
我病了，所以我需要去看医生。
which translates to, I'm sick, so I need to see a doctor.
Okay, let's break down the layers of information that are packed into that one short phrase, because it goes far beyond just the definition of the single word.
Absolutely. Firstly, it provides the grammatical function right away. You immediately see
医生
operating as the object of the verb phrase
看
to go see. So you learn the correct phrase structure and specifically how the verb see is used in this context.
And secondly, and I think this is maybe even more powerful, it provides necessary situational context. When you think of
医生
you're no longer thinking of an abstract definition from a dictionary.
Yeah.
You're thinking of the feeling of being sick, 生病, and the immediate practical necessity, 需要, of seeking help. That emotional and situational connection is a massive memory amplifier.
It creates a retrieval path based on necessity and emotion, which is a much, much stronger anchor than an alphabetical list. And thirdly, it introduces the word within a common high-frequency structure, the cause and effect relationship, which is signaled by
所以
so therefore. You're learning the structural spine of natural Chinese dialogue right alongside the vocabulary.
This method also seems crucial for managing the inherent ambiguity in the Chinese language. I mean, what happens when a word or even a single character has multiple wildly different meanings? Does context still solve that problem?
Context is the only thing that solves that problem reliably. Chinese is full of characters that are polysemous. They carry multiple meanings depending on who they're paired with or the situation.
Okay.
Take the very common verb
打
in isolation. Its primary meaning is to hit or to strike.
So a beginner learns DA means hit. That's what they write on their flashcard.
Right. But if they only learn it that way, in isolation, they are completely unprepared for real life. But if you learn the phrase
打电话
which means to make a phone call, you learn that
打
here means to dial or to do that action.
Not to hit the phone.
No.
Whoa.
Or if you learn the phrase
打折
which means to give a discount,
打
it has yet another idiomatic usage.
That is a perfect demonstration. By learning the full functioning phrase, you immediately lock down the specific usage you need, rather than trying to juggle 5 different definitions of a single character and just hoping you choose the right one in the middle of a conversation.
And that is the power of collocation learning words in the company they keep. This method accelerates fluency because it directly mimics real-life language input and output. You, the learner, get to bypass that laborious mental translation step.
So instead of thinking, okay, I need to make a call, the word for making a call is
打电话
Right. Instead of that, the entire unit
打电话
becomes one functional concept in your mind.
But I do have to play devil's advocate here. Isn't this too slow? I mean, if you need to learn thousands of words to reach literacy, learning them one full sentence at a time sounds like you'll never cover the volume you need.
And that raises a really important question of prioritization. It's volume versus usability.
Okay.
And yes, learning 3,000 words in 3,000 unique, well-formed sentences takes longer than just flipping through 3,000 flashcards. But the quality of the learning is exponentially higher.
I see.
A smaller number of contextually anchored high-frequency words that you can actually use fluently is infinitely more valuable than a vast store of isolated words that you can only recognize passively. You gain functional language faster, even if the raw word count progresses a little slower at the very beginning.
So we're choosing the path of deep, usable acquisition over shallow, passive accumulation.
Exactly.
It's about building a language foundation that won't just crumble the moment you try to speak.
Exactly. The goal isn't just knowing the word, it's knowing how to behave with the word. So we've established the internal structure with radicals and the external use with context. Now let's add the third layer of depth, the one that makes these symbols feel less like code and more like an exciting history lesson.
This is where we tap into narrative memory, and this is my favorite part. It transforms an abstract symbol into an artifact with an origin story. When the complexity of a character feels overwhelming, understanding its evolution is like a mental relief valve.
It is the ultimate mnemonic device, it really is. Tracing the lineage of characters from the earliest Oracle bone script right up to the modern simplified forms adds immense interest, depth, and motivation to the learning process.
For you, the learner, especially if you get easily frustrated by the abstract nature of the script, this section offers a psychological anchor. I mean, when you realize that the strokes you are drawing aren't arbitrary, but they're the result of millennia of refinement, you just engage with the material on a completely different level.
That realization is so powerful. We're talking about 3,000 years of visual history here. And to truly appreciate the modern characters, we need to briefly trace that chronological path. It starts with the Oracle bone script, which was used for divination, and there the characters were highly pictorial. They were literally drawings of the things they represented.
They were just visual records.
Yes.
Yep.
And over the centuries, particularly during these phases of standardization, like with bronze inscriptions and later the clerical script and regular script, those complex drawings were systematically streamlined.
Okay.
They were squared off, they were standardized, and made more efficient for quick writing, which eventually resulted in the modern simplified characters we use today. But the key is that the streamlining process removed some of the complexity, but it preserved the visual logic.
And the key for our memory is that the vast majority of these core characters were originally pictographs or ideographs. They told a story.
Yes, exactly. Let's move beyond the really simple example of mountain, which is easy to see, and let's look at a character with slightly more complexity to really illustrate the depth of this mnemonic power. Let's take the character for fish, which is in traditional or in simplified.
Okay. That character, even the simplified version, it has a distinct structure. So how does the history help us remember it?
If you look at the earliest forms of from the Oracle bone script, you can clearly see a depiction of a fish swimming sideways.
Wow.
There's a distinct head and an outline of the body. Crucially, in the center, you can see 4 small strokes, which represent the scales or the fins, and at the bottom there is a recognizable tail fin.
So the ancient scripts literally depicted the anatomical components of the creature. You can see the parts of the fish.
Absolutely. Now follow its transition. Over time, the body was stylized into a standardized square, the fins were reduced, and the tail became that bottom radical component. So when you know this, when you write the modern character, you are no longer just drawing a box with some lines inside. You are visually representing a streamlined drawing of a fish, one that retains the scales, the body shape, and the tail structure.
That is profound. You're engaging visual memory, logical structure, and historical narrative all at the same time. That triple anchor makes the character nearly unforgettable, especially compared to just drawing the modern shape in isolation.
Let's try another one that demonstrates the streamlining process beautifully. The character for horse, which is
马
in traditional or in simplified.
Okay.
In the Oracle bone script, this was just a magnificent drawing. I mean, you can see the head clearly, you can see the 4 legs, and you can see the flowing mane and tail.
You can almost hear it neighing.
It's so evocative. As it evolved into the modern traditional character, you can still clearly identify the legs at the bottom, the body in the middle, and the mane and head are stylized at the top. The entire character is structured around the animal's posture.
And then when it was simplified to is,
Certain strokes were removed, but the overall outline, the shape of the head and the legs, it remains structurally intact and recognizable if you know the history.
this raises a really important point of connection we discussed earlier. How does understanding the character's evolution help us understand the radicals we learned back in Section 1?
It completes the circuit. It's the why. If we know that the 3 dots for water originated from a drawing of a flowing stream or drops of water, we understand why it acts as a semantic indicator for aquatic concepts.
It wasn't just arbitrarily assigned that meaning.
It was the pictorial representation of water. And it's the same for others. The person radical is a simplification of a person walking or standing.
So Tracing the lineage transforms the component from just a random visual element into a piece of historical evidence. It adds logic and legitimacy to the entire radical system.
Precisely. This strategy specifically targets that aha moment that you, as a learner, are looking for. Instead of struggling with recognition, you can now look at a complicated character, break it into its modern components from Section 1, and then trace those components back to their ancient pictorial roots. You're adding a layer of mnemonic narrative that vastly improves recall.
It also gives you a deeper cultural connection, doesn't it? You're interacting with the history embedded in the language, not just the grammar.
And that depth of engagement is so key to maintaining long-term motivation. Learning thousands of characters, it requires persistence. And history provides the fuel for that persistence. So now we have the internal structure, the external context, and the historical depth. Now we just need the final piece, the structural path for sustained progress.
And this is so important. We've armed you, the learner, with these incredibly efficient cognitive tools. But the most effective tools in the world are useless if you quit out of frustration. And that brings us to the biggest enemy of sustained learning, information overload.
It's such a common mistake. The enthusiastic beginner, they buy a great dictionary and a classic Chinese novel only to find themselves utterly drowning on page 1.
Been there.
We've all been there. You encounter hundreds of unknown characters and sentence structures, and it leads to that debilitating feeling of failure and burnout.
Do not start with long or difficult texts. You have to choose graded reading materials that match your current level. This isn't just a suggestion. It's a structural requirement for sustained, stress-free progress.
Structured progress is everything. The purpose of graded material is to manage the information flow to keep you in what's often called the comprehensible input zone.
What does that mean exactly?
It means you should understand about 95 to 98% of the material you're reading already. That leaves just enough novelty to introduce new concepts without it ever becoming overwhelming.
So define graded for us in a concrete way. What system are these materials often based on?
Graded materials are texts that have been very carefully written or adapted with controlled vocabulary and grammar specific to proficiency levels. And in the context of learning Chinese, these levels are most often benchmarked against the HSK.
The HSK, that's the official standardized Chinese proficiency test.
Correct. The HSK framework provides specific, measurable goals. So HSK 1 might require knowledge of 150 characters and basic phrases.
Okay.
Graded readers designed for HSK 1 will only use those 150 characters and the associated grammar structures. And as you progress to HSK 2, 3, and beyond, the materials gradually and gently introduce more complexity. This provides you with constant, measurable success.
It's a ladder, not a cliff face.
Yeah.
And the sources detail a very smart step-by-step progression that manages this complexity. Where do you, the learner, start?
You start right at the base where the text volume is minimal and the visual support is maximal.
Picture books and comics.
Picture books and comics. The starting point is psychologically safe. It uses the visual context, which we emphasized is so important back in Section 2, to help cement the meaning of basic characters and high-frequency phrases.
The early wins here are just crucial. A learner can finish an entire book, even if it's a simple one, and feel a concrete sense of accomplishment. And that feeling builds the momentum you need for the next stage.
And after building that confidence and mastering those basic vocabulary sets, you then transition to the intermediate step. Short passages. This is where the text density increases.
Okay.
The passages are short enough to be completed in a single sitting, which minimizes fatigue, but they're long enough to provide meaningful, repeated exposure to the target vocabulary.
At this stage, you are actively retrieving the radicals and the sentences you learned previously and applying them, which reinforces all that foundational memory work.
Exactly. This stage bridges the gap between basic phrase memorization and sustained comprehension. The focus shifts from merely recognizing a word to understanding how it functions across multiple related sentences. It's structured practice for the endurance race ahead.
And finally, the ultimate goal. The advanced goal. Novels.
By the time you reach this point, you've internalized the systematic approach. You have the vocabulary foundation, you have the confidence from completing dozens of shorter materials, and you have the structural understanding to handle sustained reading.
So full novels then become immersive practice, not frustrating obstacles.
Exactly. You are applying all 4 strategies simultaneously.
This entire section really just reinforces the other 3, doesn't it? The radicals help you decode the characters in the text. Contextual learning means the vocabulary is already functional. Historical knowledge makes the symbols meaningful. And the graded path ensures you encounter all of this new knowledge at a manageable pace.
It's the structural application that makes the learning sustainable. By choosing level-appropriate materials, you ensure that your learning proceeds without the debilitating effects of anxiety or that false belief that the language is just too difficult. You are engineering success into your study schedule.
That structural framework, paired with the cognitive tricks of the components and the history, really is the key to tackling a language with this volume of unique characters. This has been an incredibly thorough deep dive into transforming what feels like a daunting challenge Chinese character acquisition into a logical, exciting, and efficient process. We have moved entirely away from the brute force repetition model.
To quickly synthesize the 4 complementary strategies for you. First, embrace the power of radicals and components. Understand their dual role as both semantic, so meaning, and phonetic, sound, clues. This drastically reduces the amount of arbitrary information you have to store.
Second, never memorize words in a vacuum. Always anchor new vocabulary in a full, usable sentence context. This builds active, natural language production by linking the word to a situation and to correct grammar.
Third, unlock the deepest memory pathway by understanding the character's evolution. Tracing the history of a character from its ancient pictographic root all the way to its modern form provides visual logic and a really powerful narrative mnemonic.
And finally, manage your volume and your confidence using graded reading materials. You have to structure your progress by moving systematically from low-volume comics to sustained novels, ensuring that you're always operating in that optimal zone of comprehensible input.
These methods, when you put them all together, they transform the learning journey. You are no longer memorizing thousands of isolated items. You are engaging with a coherent, logical system of structure, history, and usage. And that brings us to a final thought for you to carry forward. We spent a significant amount of time discussing how visual history informs character recognition.
Right, we're looking at a system where the symbol itself often carries the literal picture of what it represents. A fish, a mountain, a person.
And you should consider how fundamentally different that is from reading a purely phonetic language, like English or Spanish, where the letters themselves hold no inherent visual meaning to the word they form.
Right.
In a phonetic script, you decode sound. But in a logographic script like Chinese, you are decoding visual philosophy, a concept that has been distilled and visually preserved across millennia.
The character for sun is a direct, if streamlined, picture of the sun. The word sun in English S-U-N is just a representation of a sound. There's no sun in it.
So how might engaging with characters this way, as enduring visual distillations of concepts, change the way you approach reading any text? Does it force a different kind of observation or maybe a deeper connection to the material? That idea of the script itself carrying history is a powerful one to mull over as you begin applying these new strategies.
A fascinating provocation. We hope these 4 methods give you the structural and cognitive edge you need to successfully conquer the script.
Until next time.
Want to practice what you've learned today with a real Chinese teacher? You can get a free one-on-one trial lesson at eChineseLearning.com. That's it for today's episode of eChinese Learning Pod. Thanks for tuning in.